afternoon for the second time today. This is LVS Perspectives number 63, an industry perspective of AI in a rapidly changing world. And we are delighted to have James Prebble here today, one of our very own parents.
That's right, delighted to be here.
And thank you so much. You've just spoken to our sixth form as part of their sixth form development day.
I have.
I'm very much looking forward to hearing your presentation. I've not heard it yet. And as usual, if you've got any questions for James, please put them in the chat. And I'll have loads of questions, I'm sure, afterwards, because this is such a hot topic.
Perfect.
So over to you, James.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, yeah, I had a fabulous chat with the sixth formers earlier today. We covered a lot of topics, including the ethical boundaries that AI might be crossing. And I think what we'll do is we'll use this opportunity to maybe explore those a little bit further. As well as perhaps setting a little bit of the background and context as to where this great AI revolution has come from. So let's start here. We are very much an inflection point in the history of both technology and computing. AI, without question, is changing the way that we work within business, within industry. But more than anything, it's had a lot of people questioning the way that we do certain tasks, looking at the way that we work, and starting to explore what is the most important thread of today, the art of the possible, what can be achieved when you fuse together human intellect and the computer power of AI and indeed the kind of powerful technologies that we are presented with today. So why don't we start with going through what AI actually is. So it's important for us all to kind of remember that AI has been around for quite some time. It's really only since the introduction of tools like ChatGPT that we have, I guess, started to take it a little bit more seriously. Started to look at what that means for us, where we can use that within business, within industry. But the pure concept of AI or machine learning has been around for quite some time. The concept behind it, artificial intelligence, is essentially training or helping a computer or a machine to do things that it wasn't programmed to do, to learn, to understand, to subsequently interpret and produce an outcome. And AI is there to learn, but it can also be there to support and plan for eventualities and potential outcomes and solve particular problems. It exists in technology today. It exists in technology we've been using for years. Your Alexa is AI powered. Your Netflix, the recommendation engine, when you've watched one thing and it suggests you might want to watch something else, is at the heart of it artificial intelligence. It's taking a data input and it's determining an outcome and presenting you a subsequent problem solve or an opportunity. Watch this program. But why hadn't that filtered into mainstream business, into commerce, and what impact might that have, we ask ourselves, on our children and the jobs that they might be stepping into in the future? Well, at the heart of it is a large language model. And the large language models are what we would affectionately call, and all be aware of, ChatGPT. ChatGPT really only hit the mainstream for us, I guess, as individuals not working in kind of in tech and in AI in the mainstream around March time. Be aware of all the news stories that you will have seen around ChatGPT and its ability to create funny wedding speeches or solve complex problems or give you answers to information that you couldn't otherwise have retrieved. And they are that ChatGPT is underpinned by a large language model. And large language models, just for those of you that are interested, and referring here to notes to make sure I get the technical description completely right, really are essentially at the heart of it some computing that has been trained on billions upon billions of lines of text and trained to understand the context of the text that it's reading and consuming, and subsequently generate a human-like response or human-like outcome for us. So we ask it a question, write me my brother's wedding speech, and based on all of the content, all of the text that it's ingested and everything that it's learned about speech writing and the relationship between a groom and their brother and all of the comedy that it might have consumed and all of the heartfelt content, and it will produce an outcome. It will suggest a speech. And then you can input parameters that then subsequently change what that outcome might be. Maybe they like golf, or maybe they are, particularly fond of holidaying in a certain destination. As a result, it will deliver us a new outcome tailored to the inputs that it's been given. Now, as that has become more mainstream, that has had a demonstrable impact on business. Back to the art of the possible. As we've experimented with technology like ChatGPT, it's helped us understand that we can train it to do things that previously we had to do ourselves. One of the key words you'll hear me talking about today is the reduction of toil, the reduction of manual tasks, the reduction of effort to produce better capacity and better outcomes. And that's going to have a demonstrable impact on roles in the future, the skills that are required to thrive in a world that is indeed powered in some part by AI, and businesses are very, very quick to adopt this. Now, myself, not being a techie, but being surrounded by them within my business, we saw the potential. We see opportunity in GPT. We see opportunity for it to support us as a business in everyday tasks. So we built our own. We've got our own private, secure version, one that's not in the public, and we've trained it and taught it to do tasks for us. So, for example, whereas we might have produced a very long PowerPoint document and then be stuck with writing the executive summary, now we upload the PowerPoint document into our GPT environment and we ask it to write the executive summary. Reducing that keyword, reducing toil, reducing the effort that it takes to go through hundreds of pages to pull out the salient points. It's writing the executive summary for us. Now, key, it doesn't replace the work that we do. We still need to produce that work, but it's taking away some of the effort that's required to get to the finished product. And it's this very premise that is changing certainly the skills that a business like mine would look for, but industry at large has been very quick to adopt this sort of technology. So let's go through where the AI explosion and how that arrived. And I always like to refer to linear to exponential. We'll talk about smartphones. We all remember when we first got smartphones. And we were excited about the possibility, but we were limited in terms of its adoption, in terms of what we could do with those smartphones. It didn't happen as fast as things are happening with AI and large language models. And one of the reasons it didn't is because it was constrained by data availability. We were all struggling on 3G. And then we got 4G, and now we have 5G, and things are quicker. Similarly with the internet, its explosion was limited by bandwidth capacity. We couldn't consume video like we wanted to. We couldn't stream music. Everything was very slow and on dial-up. We were limited by the infrastructure. So the reason that GPT, the reason large language models, AI, is exploding within industry is because the infrastructure exists now. We have the bandwidth, we have the data. And when you take these things on the left-hand side, these really crazy analogies that you see here of a large language model and of a concept called low-code, no-code, which is essentially off-the-shelf coding packs that allow you to build an application in minutes. And then you fuse that with open-source software, which is software that's democratized and available for all and free to customize for anybody and work with. And then feature APIs, which is the feed of data into these environments, and the data itself, you get exponential growth. Because the building blocks are there, which means the only limit to its adoption is our capacity to understand it and the constraints that we put on ourselves in terms of the art of the possible. So, application of AI, where do we see it? And we see it everywhere, perhaps even without realizing it. The application of AI is being adopted at such a rate of knots by business, it's almost arriving overnight and to limited fanfare. Let's take Moonpig, for example. It's taken away the need to even write messages to your loved ones when you send a card. Moonpig last month launched their new AI message generator, where you simply input 3 parameters: who's it for, what do they like, and any other personality traits, and it will write for you the greetings message, powered by AI, underwritten by a large language model, a ChatGPT model. And that's not the only place. Every single image that you've seen in this presentation up to this point has been developed by an AI image generator. On screen right now, you'll see a feed that I gave it where I asked it to create a image of students at LVS Ascot learning all about AI, and it presents for me 4 potential images, and everything you've seen prior to this point has been me inputting a requirement to get an AI generated output. Positive? Maybe not. It does bring into question some of the ethics around where it learned the creativity and how it's interpreting this creativity. It does call into question whether or not we're killing a little bit of creativity and a little bit of imagination when it's writing our messages for us. And I think it's really important for us with our children to be thinking about the ethical application of GPT and large language models, certainly when it comes to the production of our homework or the courses or the tasks that we've been set by tutors here at the school. We need to think about how we are going to overcome what large language models will do in terms of people's adoption and willingness to use them to generate an outcome. Which is why we're going to spend the back half of this presentation talking about the skills that we need to hone, the skills that we need to nurture, the skills we need to develop for our children to have the best possible prospects when they make it out into the workplace, but also so that they're well equipped to work within, I guess, what is an AI-driven world, or very soon to be a kind of AI-driven working world. So, application of AI in the workplace. Let's bring this some context. Let's have a look at how this is being developed at the moment. We'll start here with a recent study by Harvard Business School, where it worked with McKinsey. And during this study, what they did was they set the McKinsey consultants their typical tasks, the things that they would have to do, producing a strategy, doing a piece of research, perhaps even a market sizing. And they gave 50% of the consultants in this control test ChatGPT access to GPT. And they gave 50% no access, asking them to follow it the way that they would normally do it. So pulling research papers, researching via the internet, meeting people, having facilitated conversations to gather their research for their outcomes. The consultants that were using GPT, that were using AI, finished 12% more tasks on average. They completed tasks 25% more quickly and produced 40% higher quality results, according to the client that received the information, than those without. How did they do it? Comes back to the keyword, the word I was talking about earlier, toil, reduction of toil. The mundane task, the task of scouring the internet for the information, the task of taking the information and interpreting that data and spotting the patterns or finding the meaning in it, the task of understanding something complex that you don't understand, be that offshore wind farms or some legal precedent. The AI model is doing the work, that early work, for those individuals and giving them capacity to add value, capacity to think, capacity to do more with the information they've been presented, unburdened by the time frame, while their colleagues, without the tool, are busy researching, trying to consolidate the information, pulling it into a meaningful structure, standardizing the data and the outputs, and then trying to drive the meaning. So it's creating a capacity, it's creating an opportunity to do better. Here's a great example of a Court of Appeal judge. And the reason I've put this one in here is really just to show the breadth of where this is being used. You've gone from a top-tier consultancy firm using it through to a Court of Appeal judge who praised jolly useful ChatGPT after asking it to support or help him produce a legal summary. Now, for the judge, if he wants to look at previous case precedent, he now has to sift through online libraries and textbooks to try and find case precedent to draw his conclusion. But ChatGPT, given access to that information, can trawl through 5, 6, 7, 8,000 previous cases and look for the case precedent and present that to the judge to help him draw his conclusion. replacing the judge? No. The judge still needs to provide his opinion, his experience and his discretion to reach a judgment and an outcome, but it's removed some toil. It's improved his capacity to think and add value. So, very valuable for the judge. And then it gets a little scary. We need to be aware of this and the entry-level jobs potentially that our children will step into when they first make it into the world of work. But there is a positive to this too. So here we see Octopus Energy, and their chief executive talks about bringing in AI technology, GPT technology, doing the work of 250 people that were responding to customer emails, and it trained the model to respond to the customer emails automatically, and it's now achieving an 80% satisfaction rate, higher than the humans that would do this. We look at that and say, well, then we're doomed. That's the end. What do we need a contact centre for? But actually, what this goes into further in the article, and the reason I've deliberately teased this part of the headline and not the remainder of the article, is because I believe that there is a big perception that AI will take all of the jobs and there'll be nothing left for any of us to do. So we should all be running for the hills. But actually the reality behind this, and if you read the full article, which I've provided the link and we will distribute that, goes on to say that what it has done is it's freed up the capacity of 250 people to deal with the complex queries, to deal with the things that require you to speak to an individual to really understand where the problems are and to spend more time with them resolving the outcome, ergo improving customer satisfaction and experience in interacting with Octopus Energy. So a huge positive from that. It's taking away the stuff that can be done really easily and leaving the complex stuff to the individuals to add value, to empathise, to provide that human touch that helps them resolve, a complex problem into an outcome. But today, certainly within industry, these are the exceptions rather than the rule. This technology really only arrived and ChatGPT, as I say, democratised kind of AI and put it in the hands of the many, which inspired us all to start thinking about, well, how can we apply this to our businesses? But very few are really truly using it for productivity gain or to identify new ways of working or new methods for generating revenue. But it is becoming, we are moving from what I like to describe as omnipresent, which is it's here and it's a thing, into omnipotent, which is where it will be ingrained and part of the everyday, part of the fabric of our working. I mean, Microsoft's Copilot, which will be ingrained and part of Teams, is their solution, their ChatGPT, their AI solution for Teams users, and is now being rolled out. Google have invested billions into their version of AI, and soon we'll find it in all of their tools, much like your Moonpig example there, where you see AI sitting there writing your messages. So today, some of those examples, they are the exception, but tomorrow they will be the rule. And by the time our children are making their way out into the world of work, it will be part of the very fabric of operations within a business, and up to us to help them develop the skills to work with those. So let's talk about that, the impact on jobs and skills for the future. Which I think can have a huge positive. So if we start by quoting Forbes in a fabulous article, which goes on to argue very, very convincingly that AI is not destroying jobs. Indeed, it's creating new ones. And I would go further and say that it's not just creating new ones, but it's taking existing ones and finding new ways to do things and creating new parameters and new skills that are required to do that existing job. So it's creating new ones and it's evolving existing ones. We think about entrepreneurs. We think about those that have ideas and ambition to do things for themselves. Often, they're constrained by limitations in certain skills, certain things that they can't do. Perhaps they're not great at pricing. Maybe they're not good at understanding the dynamics of a market or a consumer. Our AI can help and support that individual in their pursuit of their goals by doing some of the tasks that they're not particularly good at, or giving them a leg up. Instead of starting from a blank piece of paper, giving them an opportunity to start from a formed opinion that has been fed into a large language model, a ChatGPT environment, as it were. In respect of the sectors that are benefiting from this and where new roles are being created, let's take the healthcare sector, where AI can enhance medical diagnosis, expedite drug discovery and support telemedicine. And that's paving the way for professional profiles like health data analysts. Great new title, but new roles where individuals are working with the outcomes from these AI tools and supporting doctors to give better care pathways, make better decisions, prescribe the right treatments, get to answers faster so that there's prevention rather than cure. Indeed, we find that exists in sectors like agriculture as well. Some of the areas where you might least expect to see the introduction of AI technologies or large language models. So AI can help with optimizing of crop management, monitor plant health, predict weather conditions to improve agricultural yields. And this one's creating my favourite. So to quote kind of Forbes, the new role that it's creating here is agrotechnologists. Very exciting. Things that we didn't know existed are now being created by the introduction of these technologies, essentially working with the outputs and the outcomes from these models to drive decision making and to support farmers to improve their yields. But it's not all perfect. In fact, it's far from perfect. The only thing slowing us down at the moment, or the thing that is slowing us down at the moment, I should say, are that the constraints of large language models are things that are preventing, I guess, mass adoption. We are on an incredibly fast trajectory indeed. Barack Obama, part of an important technology think tank, said he came back in his podcast, came back from a think tank the other day where that think tank had likened the impact of AI on business to that of electricity on the world. Such is going to be the impact of the way that we work. Such is the adoption. Businesses like myself and hundreds that I know, this time last year we would not be talking about this. This time last year we had nobody in our AI department and now we have 10. This time last year when we were hiring graduates, we were expecting them to develop core consulting skills. Now we're expecting them to develop skills that support working with GPT and AI environments. We're expecting them to become prompt engineers. These are people that can write the prompts for the AI to spit out an outcome. So the skills that we're expecting from these individuals are changing, but the rate of adoption is slightly being constrained by cost, the processing cost for all of the data that these GPT models are working their way through to process these billions and billions and billions of lines of data costs money, costs computing power, and that will fall, but uses energy, much like cryptocurrency and crypto mining. It uses computer capacity, it uses energy, and that costs money. The speed, these models, we've had a lot of new model releases this year, so large language models there's multiple models, not just one, and lots of people, lots of companies are releasing them, OpenAI, and we've got Google and Microsoft and so on and so forth. And the speed in which these models are being released, they take time. They take time to learn, they take time to program, they take time to kind of develop. We expect to see more, but again, we expect that to take a bit of time to become a real speed of releases. Accuracy. Now this is an important one, and let's labour on this for a second, because I'm sure we're all sitting there thinking, what's this going to have? This is going to have an impact on homework. Because it is. And we need to think about this. We need to think about, indeed, how we structure tasks for homework that test the cognitive abilities of our children and the skills that can't be replicated by things like AI. Because one of the problems with the models is trust. So these models, they are built off of a degree of learning, but most of the models stop their learning from about 2021. There's 2 years of learning, that have been published that it's not picking up. But we can also, due to its capacity, we can make these models hallucinate, forget things, and come up with answers that are quite plainly wrong. And we need to be aware of this, because there will be a tendency to just believe what the model tells us. And we need to develop our skills to train ourselves to think about whether the answer being presented to us and the outcome being presented to us can be trusted. And to a certain extent, we do need to apply that filter right now. although I'm sure we will see improvements over time. And then finally, the thing we need to think about is capacity. So these models at the moment are limited by the amount of tokens that they can process, the amount of information that can be uploaded into them. Again, that's changing. So as all of this comes and we get over these problems, we will find that this is adopted faster and embraced more by large businesses, by small businesses, and indeed by entrepreneurs and individuals as well. So let's get on to the crux of this as we canter to a close from today's presentation. How can we prepare ourselves for an AI-driven workforce, or how can we prepare our children, and indeed ourselves, why not, for an AI-driven workplace? One thing that's undeniable is there are indispensable human skills. And these are the things that will create the difference, the moat, as I like to call it, between the AI and how we as individuals deliver work outcomes, work products, and work with our colleagues, because let's be frank, the machines can't. So the key skills to develop for workplaces of the future, I think, fall into kind of 5 real buckets: analytical judgment, creative thinking, digital intelligence, adaptability, and ultimately social influence. So let's break those down. Analytical judgment. What are the skills that we need to be working on as individuals and with our children to ensure that we're equipped to make the most of the technology opportunity that's presented to us? And that is critical thinking. So looking at specifically the foundational, which is the foundational element of kind of analytical judgment, is looking at how you objectively evaluate information. So developing the skills that help us effectively or objectively evaluate information, which fits neatly into problem solving. So how do we develop our problem solving skills? And interestingly, with GPT and with AI environments, with large language models, actually it's constrained by our ability to tell it what to do. And so we need to think about new ways that we come at problems, new questions to ask, new routes in to get to an answer that help us solve our problems. But we also need to develop our logical reasoning skills. We need to think about whether or not what is being presented to us indeed seems logical, and whether or not we will take that input to solve that problem. These are skills that we're developing, and we need to look at developing with our children to make sure that they can use these models to the best of their ability, and for how they and applying them to kind of business situations for positive outcome. And indeed decision making, when do and when I don't need to use these models, and when the models give me answers, how I use those to inform my decision making. So it all fits back into that analytical judgment. On top of that, and a very difficult one, and actually in today's sixth form conversation, a really, really interesting debate emerged around whether or not AI is killing creativity and whether or not it's killing creative thinking. Now, I don't work in a particularly creative environment, and I don't see an awful lot of creative application, but I do know that there are challenges to it: writing scripts, producing music, producing kind of what are being passed off as unique artworks. And certainly that's something that needs to be explored, and we need to work out how we are going to live with its capability and the impact it has on these industries. But in terms of creative thinking for specific kind of business issues, we need to hone our creative thinking skills, specifically developing our approach to innovation and thinking about how we can do things differently. In terms of divergent thinking, training ourselves to generate multiple solutions to a single problem so we can come at things from lots of different angles. From a kind of an imagination capability, thinking about that art of the possible. What could I do? What if it did this? What if it did that? And then using the technology to take away that toil and do that hard work for you and try and determine and drive an outcome for you to work with. And probably the most important one on here around creative thinking is that risk taking. Freedom to fail. We should be as proud of our failures as we are our successes, because they are the things that help us get to those outcomes, those solutions. And certainly when we're using technologies, AI-based technologies, from a creative thinking perspective, we can take risks. We can afford to take risks. It does the work for us in some respects. So we can try new things. We can experiment with the application of the technology to see if it supports an outcome. And that should be encouraged. And that's a key skill that we should develop. Digital intelligence, obviously a pretty obvious one here around the skills that we need to develop. And actually you could argue that our children are probably far more developed in this area than we are. But having a technical proficiency, not just working with the technology, but understanding how that technology works or came about, where it drives its inputs and how it produces its outcomes, how it's structured, how it's developed, how it's evolved. Having that skill will give our future workers an enormous advantage. Because I can be honest with you, and I'm sure a lot of you listening in as well will agree that whilst we're trying hard to stay up with this technology in our stage, it's very, very difficult and it's moving incredibly fast and we can't quite keep up with the pace of change, although we want to embrace that change. Those that have grown up with that technology, much like our opportunity to grow up with kind of the internet and subsequently into smartphones and beyond, our children have an advantage. They are more technically proficient than us. They have a better digital literacy than us. And as a result of it being around, they can show kind of our generations how to get the most out of this and how to work with it seamlessly. But to do that, we also need to improve skills around data proficiency, where data comes from, how we transpose data, how we read data, how we work with data, how we manage it, structure it, in order to get the most out of these technologies. But I think we also need to work very, very hard on the ethical implications. Homework, for example. AI has become so advanced, certainly large language models are so advanced. If you asked a large language model to produce a paper for you, and then you put that paper back into the large language model, it could not tell that it was written by AI. It can't tell the difference. So we need to educate on the ethical implications of this use. We will be bereft of skills if we're relying on these tools all the time. But if we're using them in the way that businesses are intending to use them, the reduction of toil, the identification of new opportunities, actually they can work harmoniously with us and they can work side by side. But we also need to think about what's going into them, what data we're putting in there, what content we're putting in there. And then that calls into questions what footprint we're leaving online about ourselves, because they could be being used by models. So we do need to think about that too. All right. Let's get down towards the back end here then of the last two skills that I want to talk about. So adaptability, a pretty obvious one, but perhaps not so obvious, emotional resilience. Understanding that the way we do things today might be quite different to the way that we do things tomorrow, and knowing something that we've relied on and a skill that we've developed might not be there or might be different or might be applied in a different way can be quite difficult to deal with. And we need to have some emotional resilience about that and a willingness to adopt new approaches and change. Similarly, learning agility. We might have learned to do things in a certain way where a machine or a tool can tell us how to do it differently. And we need to be prepared to learn new ways to prompt engineer these models, but also to work with these models and to work with the outcomes of these models. And being very open-minded. Someone using the model in a different way, someone using ChatGPT to produce an outcome with a different prompt is going to come up with a different answer. Whose answer is right? We need to be open-minded about the answers that are presented to us, the work that we're producing, and subsequently work together to find solutions. And finally, and probably most importantly, our social skills will remain. Our social skills will be incredibly important still within the workplace. Given we believe that technology might remove a lot of the mundane tasks of perhaps data scraping or producing PowerPoints or report production, and there are many, many more kind of valuable applications, one thing will remain. We need to fine-tune our skills around communication with our colleagues, with our clients, with those that we interact with. We need to fine-tune our emotional intelligence. We still need to be perceptive of when people don't understand something or people disagree with something, and make sure that we can still continue to negotiate well and construct great arguments and see things from other sides and not rely on the technology to just drive the outcome and just accept it. And that then calls into question the development of our leadership skills and our ability to lead people through to outcomes. And indeed, the way that we present our answers and we evidence our answers to support our credibility in those interactions with our colleagues. So that social influence, those social skills are so important to develop too. So to kind of conclude, I guess what I would like to say is one more of the images, and this was deliberately put in for the sixth formers today, which was to say I really pushed the AI image generation to its absolute limit by asking for a crocodile wearing a hat and a leather jacket riding a motorcycle on a mural on a school playground wall, and that's what it delivered for me. So it did a pretty good job and just gives you a sense of some of the power of the technologies that are being developed. But what I would say specifically in relation to AI within the workplace and the impact that it's having on the workplace is to really embrace the opportunity, because what this is presenting for us, for our children, and as they step into the future of work and the workplace, is an opportunity to do what they do best, is to be the best version of yourselves, unburdened by the things that take the time, producing the Excel spreadsheet, unburdened by having to sift through reams and reams of data and actually having the information presented to you, getting to answers more quickly so that you can do more thinking, you can add more value, and you can get to outcomes that are more efficient, more well-rounded, and give you capacity to think. So whilst it might be impacting certainly in terms of repeatable tasks and entry-level jobs, whilst it might be impacting those roles, it's certainly not replacing those roles. Not right now. What it's actually doing is changing the way those roles function, but also creating new roles too. So my message is hone those skills, make everyone aware of the ethical boundaries of using them, but ultimately embrace the opportunity to do more and add more value.
Thank you, James. I have been scribbling away. I've got so many questions for you.
Well, I hope I've got the answers for you.
Absolutely fantastic. And in fact, it's looking at your pictures there,
Yes.
straight away, I've been thinking of a different image for certain banners that I put out on social. And whereas I would have normally have outsourced that, I could do that myself. So straight away,
Yeah.
Resource management is going to change that in industry, isn't it?
It is. There's absolutely no doubt that it's going to change that. Whereas, I'll use a real life example. Whereas in my world, in consulting, so investing, where a business may want to invest in a business it knows very little about. Typically, it would go out to a consultancy third party, and it would say, I need to source some experts to talk about offshore wind farms. I don't know very much about offshore wind farms, but I need to know a little bit more before I look at whether I invest in that area. Now, old world, you would ask them and they would go and search and they would find some experts for you and they'd present those experts to you and you would get on the phone and you would interview those experts. But that's inefficient. That is highly subjective, that they are experts picked by people who probably don't know they're experts. Well, I have a live working example of a model where you can ask it, well, find me 5 experts in offshore wind farms. So it does. And you say, actually, no, they need to be based in Europe, so it recuts the list. Actually, no, they need to be working in offshore wind farms right now, not previously have worked in them. So it recuts the list and says, here's 5 people you might want to speak to. Now, it provides the links to their LinkedIn. Instead of speaking to them, what you can then do is say, actually, can you create a synthetic debate between these 5 individuals? And help me understand what their perspective is on offshore wind farms. Before I get on the phone and speak to them, I want to be a little bit more informed about what they think. And indeed, it uses any article they've ever published and any comment they've left, on offshore wind farms and all of their CV and the companies they work with, and it ingests that and it outputs a synthesized debate between those 5 experts on the merits of investing in offshore wind farms. Now, has that replaced my need to speak to them? It hasn't, but it's made it far more efficient and effective when I do speak to them, because now I understand, at least at a high level, what their perception is, but it's also informed the questions I might want to ask. So I asked the GPT, what sort of questions should I ask these people to make sure I'm getting the most out of these interviews, and it gives me a transcript, which I then tweak a little bit, but I get the outcome. So yeah, indeed, in terms of how I apply my time, or any individuals apply their time, yeah, indeed, your artwork you may well have outsourced, but it does call into question, are they losing work on potentially outsourced artwork? Perhaps we look at it by saying, I've got more capacity to do some of the bigger stuff, some of the more creative stuff that's going to require real thinking and bespoke design and development in order to deliver that. And as a result, because we won't do time-based pricing, we'll do value-based pricing, I can get my revenues from doing more value-add work rather than the mundane work that we all begrudge paying for.
And it's also part of our own professional development as well, isn't it? Because I mean, I know it sounds probably a bit geeky, but if I had to find out something, I'd probably enjoy that on a Friday night with a glass of Chardonnay, as I normally say. And I was at the Schools and Academies show on Wednesday, and there's a series of talks, and they cover absolutely everything. But the AI ones were just literally, you could not get a seat, and they were out in the corridor. But there was a chap there who spoke about, he asked ChatGPT to send out his bio, to tell him about himself. But it had picked up information from a conference that he'd been at, where there was also another Matthew on the panel, and it had said that he was a doctorate and everything else. So there is inaccuracies there, aren't there?
There absolutely is.
But I suppose that will only refine with time, will it?
It will refine with time, but I think that comes back to the skills that we need to develop, which is kind of that critical thinking and making sure that we are not taking the outcome as verbatim. That what we are doing is, I liken it to the blank piece of paper. Instead of having a blank piece of paper, I now have something to work from, but I mustn't take everything that's in there as read. What I need to do now is consume that and make sure I'm validating a lot of that information. It's a lot quicker to validate something that's been presented to me than to try and find that from scratch. So it's a productivity leg up, but I wouldn't say that I'm running danger of kind of convincing everybody that it's just a productivity gain. Actually, it's far more than that. You know, it can positively impact outcomes as well. I know a business that's using it that it treats moles. So it's a dermatology clinic that treats moles. And when you typically speak to someone, they triage you and they ask for information, but they've built a model that now allows you to upload your image and upload, the symptoms that you've been feeling, and it can use the image and its historic bank of image recognition to say, that looks quite serious and we need to get you to see someone straight away. Whereas those in a contact centre, perhaps there's a degree of inaccuracy because they can't look at 16,000 images just like that. So it's actually creating more positive outcomes as well. So it's not just productivity. There's lots of things that it can do. But yeah, back to your point there, absolutely.
So you've, as you say, your workforce has grown in AI.
Yes.
So you've got 10 working on AI. Are they AI specialists that have come through the graduate computer coding route, or where are they from? So
it's a real mix, actually. It's a real mix. There are those that are engineers that code and build kind of our own private GPT solution, for example. And then there are those that have had no experience of coding, but what they are doing, I reference prompt engineering. That is simply writing a command for the AI, for the GPT to present an outcome, like find me an expert, and it does that. You put the parameters around it. We've had people from our graduate program moving into our AI team who are there to help write the prompts, for example, and onboard clients as to how to use it. And then there are individuals within the team that are there to come up with new, weird and wonderful ways to apply this technology to business situations that present a better outcome. So you've got an incredible mix. You've got really creative business thinkers who are thinking of all the ideas. You've got those that are on a almost customer support lens, thinking about, well, what can I make it do that helps the customer? And then you've got those that are building. So it's incredible variety of backgrounds.
So it must be challenging for you as well, because obviously being a CEO of a company, you have got to almost have a crystal ball. And I put a post out earlier, does anyone have a crystal ball? Because if you're trying to create a strategy now, even for the next year, it's incredibly difficult because we don't know what's out there, do we? No,
we don't. I think if we're thinking about our broader business strategies, everyone has one. School has one. My business has one. Everyone has a kind of a strategy, which is I'm here and I want to get there. Right? And then the tactics, they're the tracks that we leave behind us to get to that outcome. whilst the technology is here and a support to that, you're absolutely right to say that it creates a degree of uncertainty. But I think what we mustn't do is deviate from our plans. Our strategy still remains, I want to get from A to B. How I get there, that will change.
But also, do we know what, so for example, I'm in education.
Yeah.
And this is a really exciting time. You know, I don't think I've ever come across a time in education that's been as exciting as this. And I don't see it as a threat at all. But it's knowing what that B is. I know where A is.
Yeah.
As you say, a year ago, we were only just talking about ChatGPT in November of 2022.
That's right.
So what does B look like? So I know pupil outcomes, the best outcomes for them is our B.
Yeah.
But it's going to be, it's a very uncertain world, isn't it?
It plays back to the open-mindedness, the agility. Yeah. We all need to have a degree of agility. There's a direction that we want to travel, but that may deviate, that may meander as new technologies come to the fore. You may have had an ambition to equip the sixth formers with some technology skills by the end of next year. That's a mission that you're on. But those technology skills might be demonstrably different, or the way that they learn them might be completely different. But the ambition is to make them better versions of themselves with that technology. That remains. But you're absolutely right. It's created a degree of uncertainty, but opportunity.
So the graduates that you're seeing coming through now, because there's one big thing that we work with a WOW, is giving the children the right attitudes to go into the workforce.
Yeah.
Do you see a change, a difference? Is there generational differences?
I do. Today's grad, I've been recruiting graduates for the best part of, 9 years, and prior to that, there's been plenty of companies where we had big graduate programs. Today's graduates that arrive are just so more equipped for kind of the world of work when they arrive. They're so well educated, they're so well qualified. The effort that, look, to get into kind of top tier jobs, to get into top tier consulting jobs, or to get into top tier finance jobs or medical jobs, you do need to be well educated. It's incredibly competitive, but they are incredibly digitally literate. So they have, I talk about their advantage, they have a distinct advantage because those ahead of them have been spending their careers getting up to speed and working with the technology and changing the way they work. Today's graduates, certainly today anyway, are arriving with such a good degree of digital and technology literacy. They're already using kind of large language models. They're already using kind of data analytics programs, data visualization programs. They're completely literate in all of the packages and programs you would need them to be using, because the university education has evolved to support that too. And as a result, they're catching up with their peers a lot quicker, actually. I think it's a very exciting time for them, because there is no doubt that my generation in work will always be behind the curve. And they get a chance to arrive on it.
And talking about being behind the curve and everything, so we've got the human beings pushing the AI. The AI is going that way very, very quickly. Human beings are going to be playing catch up. So at what point are we going to be with humans forever playing kind of catch up, and how do we cope with it? I mean, that's probably a big philosophical question, that one, but you know.
I mean, how we cope with it, everyone's attitudes are different. There are those that will bury their head and say, I don't need this, I don't want this, you know, and there are those that will doom-monger, it's the end of the world. And then I guess I've always been interested in technology, always. I was a hopeless coder, you know, so I was never going to get a job as an engineer, and I couldn't design and build websites, but I always wanted to be involved in this space. I've always embraced the opportunity. Anything that makes my life easier, that makes me more productive, that gives me kind of an opportunity to spend more time thinking and interacting and adding value and my perspective on things, I've always enjoyed. And so I think we don't know what the future holds. We certainly don't know how quickly this will be adopted by business. We don't really understand the privacy implications of this either.
Well, there's a GDPR thing, aren't there? Because you know, I know I've got children in the industry who are developing systems as well. You know, and you think, but remember, whatever you put in, it's not private, is it?
No, it's not.
Once it's out there, it's got the information, hasn't it?
Indeed. I mean, the only way that you overcome that, although it creates very closed application. So the model that I built for our business that our clients use is private to them. It's not public, so it's private model, private retrieval, and it sits in their private servers, so no one gets to see anything. But that's not practical for the whole world. And However, I think businesses will become better at building their own models, definitely. You'll start to see teams within corporates building their own models that are private. But it's a good one to raise. It's a word of caution to everybody using public ChatGPT. Anything that you put in that is training the model on your information.
And talking about ethics, so I ran a competition on China recently, and there were some really, really good entries. But there was also, obviously, use of AI in there.
Yeah.
Right down from the basics of when you have something in ChatGPT, it's slightly shaded, isn't it? So if you're going to copy and paste it onto a document, children, make sure you get rid of the shading first, because that was a really. And I think it's just that, and then the winners were the people that said, I feel that, I think that. So it's that human bit
Absolutely.
coming back in there as well. Yeah. And also with ethics as well. So obviously with all this data and information, we've got the data farms, we've got, these data centres, they're going to be expanding astronomically, aren't they?
They are, yes.
What's the impact of that?
Well, there's an environmental impact, of course. The processing power that's required as they expand. I don't truly know. As I say, I'm an enthusiastic user rather than a kind of a deep expert in kind of what's required to model these and to make them work and operate. There is that back to that ethical implication. Certainly, I mean, firstly, I'm disappointed I didn't win the Panda with my with my AI submitted solution. But you're absolutely right. I think, of course, you're better placed to kind of have a perspective on this than me. Maybe I'll turn the lens on you and your question.
Ask me a question. Yeah.
How are we going to set tasks for our children, certainly from an education standpoint, that tests their ability to have consumed it, to have developed that knowledge and learning, and then apply that when there is an obvious shortcut sitting there that's very difficult to determine whether or not it's been produced by them? And I think your example of the eye and how it's interpreted, and it's that creativity that it just can't create, that it just can't deliver. It's the interpretation and the application, and in fact, mistakes are what tell me that this has been produced by an individual, not by a machine. But we're going to need to figure out ways to test people on that.
Well, this is why I find also in education, so when Rishi Sunak announced this 2030 EBAC, this internet, I was thinking, that's 7 years away, Rishi. Next year at this time, the world is going to have moved on so fast. And digital exams apparently not, going online totally for exams, not due till 2030. That's going to happen with a lot sooner as well. So in education, we've got all those things to think about.
Yes, you have, yeah.
But you see, with Round Square that we've got now, we're going through accreditation, the globalised citizen, the ethics, the sustainability parts, that's building the humans is going to be our task.
Yes.
And more so, the leadership qualities, and making sure the children are achieving the skills.
Yeah.
To be able to raise that.
I think it's a fabulous phrase, building the humans. I think that absolutely, that's where the energy. Building those skills that you simply can't replicate online. No. And genuinely, if we embrace that it can shortcut toil, the tasks that we are wasting our energy on, although some of them, I will say, some of them are kind of key core skills to us, being able to work with a spreadsheet, being able to structure data, that actually we need to be able to do that, to know that the machine has produced it in the right way in some respects. But those skills that are beyond that, those softer skills and the development of those and infusing them with technology, that's when we'll start to win, I think.
Brilliant. Well, I think we've stunned our audience because there's no questions there, but I think it's been a lovely chat. Thank you so much. Really informative. I'm going to take you for some lunch now.
Fabulous.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. Have a lovely weekend and see you soon. Thank you.